Dr. McPherson, thank you for having me come here, and I thank all of you. And I wish to say that I'm very happy for all of you and your commitment to humanism. But I'm also very happy because of my professors are here, and they've kind of shrunk me right down to size as soon as I've seen them, and I respect them, and I'd like to give them an applause for teaching me and guiding me in my life. I'm very happy to speak to all the accomplished students from St. George's, and I acknowledge with deep respect Dr. Arnold Gold. He's a truly altruistic physician who has today established, to me, a solid place for the virtue of humanism in medicine. I thank my school, I thank Chancellor Charles Modica, and I'm very, very grateful, again, that I've been asked to be here tonight to speak with you, maybe give some words of encouragement, some words of fear, but that's good. Regarding the ethical practice of medicine in the 21st century. It's very interesting for me to see such humanism in medicine tonight here, and hopefully we can continue to carry this torch that's handed to us from Drs. Arnold and Sandra Gold. Indoctrination into the world of altruistic medicine is a natural process. It shouldn't be very difficult. It's a process that should be experienced and desired by all students. But each student's awareness of this virtue of altruistic medicine, such as the benefits of having it and the disadvantages of not having it, are quite different. All of you students here tonight are experiencing a greater level of understanding regarding your chosen profession. An understanding that could sustain you beyond all situations, and I call this the practice of humanism. Reflecting on your years of diligence and devotion thus far, you can now begin to see what might be imagined as a complete physician. I'd like to take a moment and seriously reflect on 3 questions. Why have you chosen this profession? What is your true intent? And what is your ultimate motivation? I ask these questions because there are many hurdles ahead, completely different in nature from what you were taught in medical school. Certainly, you'll be required to make a diagnosis, and you'll be required to follow through on care, and you'll be required to do the best for your patient, and in turn, you must still protect your medical license. Juggling physiology to anatomy to biochemistry to mathematics, like Dr. Weissman was speaking about, all these different things going on in your head. You'll incorporate symptoms. You'll ultimately convert these to thoughts and into a diagnosis that'll help treat your patients. That's the easy part. That's what you were all trained to do. And as an experienced physician, I say that the efficiency and the accuracy of your diagnosis will strengthen both with time and experience. So please be patient with yourselves. Don't rush so much into that direction. You have so much knowledge and wisdom already there. Also in time, you'll establish a unique philosophy with which you alone will conform to and maintain throughout your life. It'll be your own philosophy. Now, what you didn't learn in medical school, and what you least expect, and what might be hard to accept, is the fact that in the 21st century, there are many healthcare organizations which will monopolize the so-called healthcare industry. And unknowingly, you may find yourself working for them. They will definitely attempt to limit your time and care with your patients. They will not be, and they're not interested in your ability to practice medicine correctly and properly. They are only interested if their reputation is affected or if the shareholders' profits are at risk. Their interest is to make a profit. That's a business. You're not a business. You're people that are concerned about others. This action could be at the expense of your ethics, or possibly can even cost your license. In the 21st century, healthcare's industry's perspective, the physician has become a commodity in lieu of a profession. You also may be forced to prescribe less effective medications, as these costs of the medications may be less expensive for the company, or the company might even have a financial investment in them. You also may be denied to order a simple test that might give you the correct diagnosis to save a life. And in this present climate, with hospitals, and I'm in private practice, they're unable to keep their beds full. They're running around starting primary care centers. You get a colonoscopy and you get prosciutto Parma at the same time. You may not be directed by your peers because they cannot keep their beds full. You may be credentialed by individuals that are administrators and put policies and procedures together that have chief of staffs get to a point that they don't know what they're signing because they don't know the legal ramifications. There's chief of staffs in hospitals that I've spoken to that says, we have to do this. And I call the joint and I talk to the people at the Joint Commission and they tell me that's the wrong way because they're so engrossed in their medicine, in their care, they're being directed what to do without knowing it. And once the policies and procedures are in place, that's it. The doctors have to follow it. You may be caught in a catch-22 net of being a great physician, practicing quality care, resulting with low admissions in the hospital at one hand, and because of this, chastised by your hospital for a low admissions provider, and ultimately lose your status for voting rights, and even your hospital privilege because the hospital's losing money on you. Insurance companies want you not to do anything. They want to keep everything one way, and then the hospitals don't want you to, they want to make sure you get the patients in the hospital. And everybody's pulling you. You may be surprised. Some organizations may even eliminate you without cause for economic reasons, meaning you will be credentialed based on economics, not on your expertise nor your ability to diagnose or treat accurately. You may even be legally locked into a program that you feel may not be in accordance with your ethical standards. It will be entirely up to you. You are the future of medicine, the future leaders. You will learn to accept, or you will learn not to accept what road to take, to adjust or not to adjust. There'll be some good things, some bad things. But regardless of all that I'm mentioning here, you will need to be aware of these pitfalls. You can't go ignorantly into this. Because the pitfalls that lurk ahead, you have to continue with optimism and compassion, because that's what's in your heart that made you students and doctors. Your compassion may be the only way that others will realize mindful realization about being a human being. Unfortunately, at this time, the U.S. government's in a financial dilemma and sadly politically motivated regarding health care today. So you see what you got yourself into? Well, all's not lost. Whatever happens, do not lose your compassion, as Dr. Weissman says, your humanism in all this, as this is the door to others' realization. So let's discuss one's ability to practice humanism in medicine as it pertains to maintaining mindfulness, maintaining your inner vows, and the ethical responsibility to all your patients. Some of you may be interested in learning on how to stay mindful with all this. You may even want guidance in the future. And it may be important to you to find a mentor that you can trust. These 3 doctors here that I know are my mentors. They don't realize it, they don't remember, but I've carried them with me throughout my life. I wasn't fortunate enough to speak with them about issues. Fortunately, Dr. Rodney Croft, was able to communicate with me and gave me some words of wisdom that helped a dilemma that I'm going through. So how do you maintain your acquired intense knowledge of medicine Be gentle enough for each and every person that calls upon you, and at the same time satisfy the time constraints, quick with patients, money for shareholders, and all the healthcare organizations that you work for. How do you do all of that? How do you go beyond temporary gain and develop an attitude of altruistic embrace and continue with this evolution of U.S. healthcare today while keeping your values? Those of you that are going to practice in this country. How to focus and remain true to what you were taught. How strong and determined are you? I'm supposed to drink water here, but I don't have any. That's okay. To help with this, I put together a few steps focusing on practicing of mindfulness that might enable young doctors as yourself to gain freedom and independence, allowing you to treat your fellow human beings the way you were all taught. First, as physicians, we all should cultivate the aspiration for compassion. This may be accomplished by being mindful of the suffering in this world and the impermanence of our being. Remember, for years, students, you spent most of your time getting away from everybody, getting away from your family, getting away from your friends, so you can focus and concentrate, an aspiration that was self-motivated. Even so, you made an enormous sacrifice and gained a strong sense of wisdom in medicine. Now you've got to regroup. You've got to incorporate the same amount of compassion back to others. Incorporating your friends, your family, now your patients back in your life, and making sacrifices for them. Believe me, that's a task. Many of you may have already an understanding of the unique connection of science, of medicine, and humanism, as Dr. Weissman said. The two pillars joined together that Dr. Gold speaks of. The finishing touch of the complete doctor. Now, I sometimes use the word wisdom in place of science, and compassion in place of humanism. Being of these two are of the utmost importance. Being mindful of these two. My example of being mindful of them is having the ability to join the two in harmony. First, joining the composition of intellectual understanding such as science, with the second joining the ethical values of humanity, likened to tuning of a stringed instrument. Your tightening of the strings as a form of wisdom or science, plus realizing that as the string tightens, the pitch will get higher. The loosening of the strings as a form of compassion or humanism, gently letting go, selflessly. Not to the point of ignorance, just as a musician, tightening without over-tuning so as not to cause it to snap. You don't want to go out there and snap. Wisdom and compassion can be expressed in many ways. A physician can exercise compassion with an altruistic approach to the patient's painful symptoms when they come in. You're compassionate to them. That's one pillar. Then you exercise your wisdom of science to identify the root of the cause. That's the other pillar. Here the physician is motivated by compassion to accumulate wisdom to help the patient. These inner compassionate feelings must work harmoniously with equal amount of intellect. So why even know this? Well, for me, there are two reasons why physicians should maintain mindfulness regarding this harmony. First, because we are and we will be responsible for the humanistic care of others, not only the analytical part. And second, we're practicing the noble profession in the 21st century. It's different from the time of Hippocrates in 380 BC. He was in charge. He didn't deal with the corporations, the shareholders, the marketers, the hospital budget, the government budget, the greed. You're not in control anymore. Your ethical principles may be tested. Compromising your nature will determine how out of tune you are regarding your own state of humanistic affairs, which may result in mental affliction. When I speak of mental afflictions in the medical profession, I'm speaking of doctor burnout. In my opinion, here one is not in harmony with one's true heartstrings, inner values, not being in harmony will never satisfy your human need as a physician. Regardless of the present situation of healthcare, one should remain cheerful. Because there's organizations such as this Arnold Gold Foundation, which have an interest in and have begun to establish action towards the humanism in medicine, joining equally with the present standards of conventional science. Right now in the 21st century, symbolically, we have one wing, science, wisdom, that's the size of an eagle. It's very large. And the other side of the bird, the wing of compassion, is the size of a sparrow. We can only go down, spiral down. And as a pilot who does aerobatics, I'd like to have both wings the same. Tonight, however, we're recognizing all of you, the qualities of compassionate people, so we can increase this wing. You are the future. Now, developing an attitude that preserves the tradition of the Arnold Gold Foundation is of utmost importance to me, because I'm seeing this now for the first time. So now that we see the road ahead, how does one establish or cultivate compassion? Can compassion be created? Or is it a jewel that's present in every one of us, and one just needs to be aware of it? In my humble opinion, it is one who exercises pure intention and has a responsibility to take action to help others. So how do you develop an attitude to help others? I believe the first is to remember the impermanence of this life, how short it really is. This will enable your mind to realize yourself and others. And that may be your cause of inspiration to become a doctor. You know, years ago as a young man in 1976, I left my home in New Jersey to go to school to South India. I began to realize that the main cause of friction or lack of compassion in my life was being unfamiliar and frightened with my surroundings. Seeing life and everyone as separate, them and me. If only I could really enjoy all humanity, I said. Having compassion for even my enemies would seem logical for a doctor. That's pretty tough. We all say this in our given faith, and as human beings, we all try and we really want to believe it, whether we go to church, the temple, the mosque. But when we get right down to it and experience it, we say, well, I believe in humanity, but this person's too stingy. And this one, I don't know. I don't like this one. This one's this one's that. We all continually make exceptions. It becomes comical. One begins to create a delusional criteria of who belongs in their world of humanity, like expecting personal gain because you become a doctor. It reminds me of a joke. I'm going to try a joke. Just to, it's real tight right now, so I'm trying to loosen the strings. There's these people, and they're on their way to the next life. And in the Catholic faith, there's a person by the name of St. Peter who always hold the keys to the gate. And all these people are online, and while they're online, there's an individual. You may have heard this joke. I have to say that. And a guy with a white coat comes flying by, and he hits everybody with their white coat. I wonder, who's this guy with the white lab coat that's going back and forth? So as they go to the front of the line, they're waiting, and they're seeing him run back and forth, and finally, they get to the front. One person says, I'm not really concerned about my next life. Now, who's the guy in the white lab coat running around? He goes, oh, that's God. He thinks he's a doctor. Well, I'm sure you'll agree that the experiences traveling and going to St. George's, you have a more realistic attitude about who you are, becoming doctors. For me, experiencing medical school first in India, St. Vincent, Grenada, England, I had to leave a worried widowed mother, a widowed sister, and a needy younger sister, all of whom I helped when I was younger. But I was like you, I had to be a doctor. I don't know why I had to do it, but there was this drive. I don't know where it came from, but it kept brewing. We didn't have any money. My father had passed. In many ways, I felt guilty for leaving and traveling so far to India. So I wished others would take the place of me and be kind and helpful to my family when I was away. I was looking for help. My father was gone. My mother depended on me. So I made a vow. And I visualized the exact situation with every person I encountered. And I began to exchange myself for others. And I'll try to explain. My first vow was to cultivate a direction to care for others. In return, I made this pact that hopefully my family would be cared for by someone else. It was a bit selfish, but it's kind of a start in humanism. So when I went to India, whether they were frightened students like myself, or my neighbors in the jungle of South India, or my troubled patients, or beggars on the sidewalk, or sadhus that I started to hang out with meditating in the street, I began to see all of them as myself and my family. I exchanged myself for them. I became familiar. They were no longer foreign. I was no longer afraid. I began to see that fears related to physical or mental afflictions were the same for all of us. There were no differences. I realized one day I would die like my father unexpectedly. And I was reminded of my loving family, each and every patient I encountered and cared for. When seeing an older woman, it was like watching my own mother in need. And in India that time, I was worried about my mother. And the only time I got a letter was during monsoons, and my mother liked to write with a felt pen. So all I saw was a big smear. When watching an older or younger man dying of a heart attack, as my father did, I saw sisters and brothers losing a parent. Now this is the key. Each patient gave me the gift of effortless power to allow me to enter a state of humanism without exhaustion. Just think about that. I can practice medicine and I can just keep going and I don't get tired. And that's my wife. I don't get tired. I get rejuvenated when I see my patients. They're like my family. Later in my life, I became medical director of New Jersey State Prisons for correctional medical. And I cared for inmates in death row. I cared without judgment. I came to see that every living being suffers, whether rich or poor, famous or infamous. Each one of us comes into being alone. And you may not believe this, but you're all going to expire alone. Caring for someone you least expect may just spark a light for a split second and brighten a frightened mind darkened for so many years. Embracing all experiences, good or bad, with a mindful, compassionate attitude develops a sense of freedom. And that is the freedom and independence I'm talking about. Now, as medical director of Mercer County Hospice, I found that compassionate mindfulness is really easily established. One continually identifies with impermanence and becomes familiar with the inevitable. Seeing and caring for the suffering patient, their family, their religion, their culture, all of this develops a sense of respect for the many ways of departing this life. Realizing that science and technology ultimately will be defeated. Humanism will be your only tool left. Here one witnesses compassion ultimately meeting with science as a bird soars and finally meets its shadow at the ground. Becoming familiar with this type of care may allow you to question, have I acted in true harmony, with honesty? Am I really content? Am I also compassionate to myself? It's my opinion that once we begin to see the impermanence of it all and we maintain mindful awareness, the fear of losing yourself, of losing what you believed, who you think you are, or what I think I am, begins to dissolve. And our actions become more meaningful. Mindfulness, Simply being aware of this life each and every moment, the stages of change, watching these transitions, even the process of death, all of this is the nature of life itself. Through the wisdom of science, you know the process of death is just as important as birth. And through the compassion of humanism, you do the best you can for others for what you have been given. These are my thoughts on the meaning of wisdom and compassion, science and wisdom combined in harmony, accepting all cultures, all paths, all religion, including the dilemma of the 21st century healthcare. You can't let that get you either. You got to roll with it. Lastly, I've been fortunate enough to see much of the world, learning the science of medicine, living with many cultures. This was a gift to St. George's. But the greatest gift of all was the people I met, my teachers, my family. From them, I was able to learn the greatest religion of all, humanity. And I wish all of you good aspiration. I'm proud of all of you. And may all of you have a happy and healthy life. And thank you for listening.